Today on the special Rambling About Cars, Lamborghini Countach is back. It is freaking back. It is a brand new Lamborghini Countach. And if you're listening to this when the podcast airs on Friday, August 13th, this is breaking news. This is happening right now. And we have information, we have photos, all of these things to share. We're going to talk about Countach history. So Lambo lovers, holy crap, it's podcast time. I'm Christopher Smith. Across the way is Chris Bruce. And this has been an exciting few days for us, hasn't it?
Yeah, if you've been looking at motor1.com, you will have noticed a lot of Countach stuff, stories on the site, and this is why. We obviously we had the teaser, we knew this was coming, but we are recording this ahead of time. But we have all the information now, so we have all the information now, and can't tell you until when this show goes live.
Oh, and it's been so hard to keep this one secret. I mean, usually I don't have a problem, but it's been so hard for this because I mean, it's the Countach. Does it get any more iconic in the world of supercars than Countach?
I mean, it's that and the F40 are kind of the ones.
Yeah, and I mean, to be clear, yeah. I mean, this is breaking news as you are hearing this. Hopefully, when the episode airs on Friday. And yes, we've had information ahead of time, but Bruce and I mean, we're still kind of just getting this information. So yeah. even though we're recording a couple days ahead, we're still kind of learning about this car too. So I feel like we're all learning about it together. And yeah, let me tell you a little bit about it. Bruce, you got some photos that you're going to pull up?
Yeah, I'm going to pull up some photos. So for anyone watching, I apologize. So our Italian team uploaded these photos. In the U.S. side, we usually try to name them. I don't have names for these photos. So if you see something come up and then come down like just happened, it's because I was guessing that I picked the right one and I picked the wrong one.
Spoiler alert, all of these photos are the brand new Lamborghini Countach.
There we go.
Folks, you're going to want to go to YouTube to catch our podcast if you're listening over Spotify or just an audio stream, or better yet, go to motor1.com because we actually have people out at Monterey Car Week where this is debuting right now.
Yep.
We'll have live video. And yeah, so here's what you need to know. Brand new Lamborghini Countach is called the Countach LP1 800-4. You can probably guess what 800-4 stands for. The big news, yes, it has a V12, but it's not.
Tell people what 800/4 means. Don't just tease it.
If you don't know what 800-4 means and you're listening to Ram, okay, I'll explain it. 800-4, we're talking horsepower and driven wheels, which in this case is all four.
Right. So
this basically has the same powertrain as the Cyan, right? It's technically a hybrid. It's a mild hybrid. It has Lamborghini's weird supercapacitor system, where there's a small electric motor hooked into the transmission. So you still have your full use of the V12, and then the electric motor just adds a little bit more power. Do you have the stats offhand, Bruce, for the power?
I do. Just and to clarify real quick. So Lamborghini always likes to use metric horsepower, which is slightly more than good old American horsepower. So 800 is 800 metric horsepower, which would be 789 horsepower as Americans would see it. Specifically, the engine itself is making 780 metric horsepower, and the electric motor is making 34. But because of the kind of the way all of that works, it's not simply 780 plus 34. Total system is 800.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's a lot of power.
Oh, we're sounding like, oh, we're disappointed. No,
there's no disappointment.
Totally not.
Clarifications of things.
Lamborghini says this goes 0 to 60 in 2.8 seconds. It tops out at 221 miles per hour. That's 355 kilometers per hour. It's obviously way, way faster than the original Countach. But I mean, let's talk a little bit about how it looks. I mean, those are the stats. That's what everybody wants to know right off the bat.
So wait, one other thing I think people should know is that I love the way Lamborghini puts this. This is a one of few. This is not a one of one, not a one of many, a one of few. They're making 112 of these.
Now, do you know why they're making 112? Because this was kind of buried a little bit in the press release.
You're going to tell me, not offhand. I'm sure there's some interesting little factoid.
The original internal code name for the Lamborghini Countach project, like way back in the late 60s, early 70s.
The LT112
was 112. So yeah, the 112 that they're going to build, it's an homage to the original Lamborghini Countach. I mean, it's a neat little Easter egg, right? As if this car isn't going to be interesting enough already. And yeah, I mean, to reiterate, it's the 6.5 liter V12, the familiar V12 that we know, with that electric motor. No manual transmission. It's the same flappy paddle gearbox. I know there are going to be Countach people out there that are just going to be like, oh, it's not a Countach if I can't shift it, or it's not a Countach if it doesn't have the big wing on the back. This has neither. But honestly, when you look at these photos, and again, motor1.com, or go see us on YouTube, Motor One Podcasts, I think, Bruce, this looks great. I think they did a really good job of modernizing a Countach. And we should also clarify, it's really a reskinned Aventador. It's
an Aventador with a body kit, if we want to be unfair.
Yeah. I think that's being a little unfair. It's not just a body kit. I mean,
I'm disagreeing with you.
It's reskinned, but I think they're
very reductive. It's an Aventador with a body kit.
Yeah, it's an Aventador. I mean, we knew Lamborghini wasn't going to build an entirely new car this quick and send it out. So
I want to share one of my favorite things about this is that you're going to be able to get them in vintage colors, which is the image I'm sharing now.
Yes.
So they have the heritage colors and the contemporary colors. Who cares about the contemporary colors? They're stuff you've seen before, but you're going to be able to get it in brown. Look at that. Luca del Bosco and Bronzante. I want to be the guy with the stupid amount of money that buys their Countach in brown. Like...
Yeah, I mean, how many colors do we have here? What is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 12. I mean, there's like 30 or 40 colors.
18.
So, I mean, in theory,
23.
They're only building 112.
33, it looks like.
I mean, there are enough colors to where, I mean, the 112 is going to be rare anyways.
Yeah.
But, I mean, are we going to see a one-of-one Bronzante?
I hope everyone orders it in Bronzante. That's the only color they should have offered. Although, look at that Viola 30th. Who doesn't want like a pastel purple? Like that would look so good. And I love the name Verde Scandale. Like, it's such a scandal that this car is green. Like, that's such a good name, too.
The Italian language is just such a beautiful language. Anything you say in Italian is going to sound amazing. But I mean, let's talk a little bit about the styling. We've tossed out the stats there. That's what everybody wants to know. Yes, it's still a naturally aspirated V12, but it does have the hybrid system. Lamborghini doesn't offer anything on fuel economy yet. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It so doesn't matter. And I mean, the interior is still going to feel like an Aventador. You're not going to get in it and have the air conditioning barely work. You're not going to get in it and have your feet crowded. I will say this. Looking at the photos, and we should also say Lamborghini styled this mostly based on the earlier Countaches through the 70s, before they got the big fender flares, before they got the big wing. And we see that looking now on YouTube here. And I'll say this much. I bet you cannot see out of the back of that car. Just like the original. I mean, the way the back and the engine cover is sloped down. I mean, it looks like the Countach, in my opinion.
But Smith, I want you to notice something. For our YouTube folks, I'm zooming in on it now.
Yes, I know.
That little guy right there.
I know. That's going to be your reverse camera. That's fine.
No, it's totally fine. But it means you will be able to see out the back, just not through any mirrors or stuff like that. There's a camera there.
And if you really want to go old school, you could just pretend the camera isn't there. You can open up the scissored doors, which, yes, of course, it's going to have the scissored doors. And you can lean your butt out the side and try to look back as you're backing up.
You pull a Raul Julia from Cannonball Run and you just pull it off. That's Raul Julia, right? Right? That's Raul Julia. I think it's Raul Julia.
From Cannonball Run?
Yeah.
You mean Burt Reynolds?
No. Who drives the Countach in Cannonball? Or am I thinking of Gumball Rally?
I think you must be thinking of something else. The first Cannonball Run, I can't remember the characters. It was the two ladies. Adrienne Barbeau and Sarah Buckman in Cannonball Run 1. And I totally forgot this, and I remembered it today. As me and editor-in-chief John Neff were kind of goofing around, finding some lead images for another Countach story. Cannonball Run 2 also had a big Countach intro. And I can't remember. Catherine Bach was one of the drivers on that one, and I can't remember who the other actress was. And then, of course, Speed Zone, which is Cannonball, like an unofficial Cannonball Run 3, that also had a Countach intro. We're kind of getting a little ahead of ourselves. We're going to talk about that later. Let's talk more about the styling, though, because...
here real quick. Here's the one from Cannonball Run that we're talking about. It has the big stupid wing. It's got the front wing, which is also stupid, but stupid in kind of a cool way.
But that's probably one of the coolest intros of any car movie of all time. It's like just a minute and a half, and it starts off no music. It just starts off with that V12, and I mean it is the V12. It's not some V8 dubbed in for American viewing audiences. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's talk a little bit more about the styling, because if you're not able to jump to motor1.com right now, if you're not able to catch us on YouTube right now, you're thinking, okay, well, I mean, what does this thing look like? It's a reskinned Aventador, but they have the proper wedge shape. It has those big kind of triangular shaped side intakes that the Countach had, only they're much bigger on this one. Mm-hmm. It has that rear engine cover that's styled like the Countach. It's got some scoops back there. It rides on 20-inch, sort of a modern take of the old Countach phone dialer wheels. They're 20 inches up front, 21 inches in the back, 355 series tires at the back, so a little bit wider than the Countach. We're looking at the front right now on YouTube.
I think you know what I'm about to say. You know what I miss?
The pop-ups.
Yeah, I wish it had pop-up headlights.
But come on. How often did you see a Lamborghini Countach with its headlights up? Like never. Almost never.
No. And you're absolutely right.
So this, I mean, I'm just fine with this. I am just fine. And I mean, totally. Pop-up headlights were legislated out of use anyways.
Yeah.
I am just fine with this design with the thin lights up front that are probably going to be much brighter and shine much better than the original Countach's pop-up lights did. But the cool thing is they have the vents behind those headlights that sort of mimic the placement of those original pop-ups. Did you notice that?
I did notice that, yeah.
And it's got the sort of the big vent that goes right across the well, in this case, the front trunk. But I mean, the windshield is flat. I feel like they just have the rake angle almost right. I mean, the original Countach, the rake angle on the windshield, I mean, it pretty much matched the slope of the front. And I don't think it's quite the case here. But I mean, you're working with an Aventador. There's only so much you can do, right?
Absolutely.
So,
talk 1 second. I know our Italian colleagues made a very nice gallery of old Countach images. I'm going to pull up just what an early one looks like, just so people can see.
That is one thing that I didn't grab. So, actually, you know what, Bruce? Let me bring up a photo here on my end.
Of course,
because I have a photo of the new Countach with the old. So let's take a look and see how that breaks down here. So, I mean, obviously you have the old Countach on the top of this photo, the new Countach down below. I mean, obviously it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be a carbon copy, and it shouldn't be. This is a new Countach. But when you look at it from this angle, I mean, I know Lamborghini, they're kind of dipping into the money well a little bit by just taking their Aventador and putting some different body panels on it. But I got to give credit where credit is due. I think they've done an admirable job of trying to capture the original Countach. And this is a really good image showing, they're going after really that original earlier mid 70s design before it got the goofy fenders and the big wing on the back. A lot of people prefer that style. That's the wedge that's just a lot sleeker. And I mean, that's what we're looking at here. I mean, what do you think, Bruce? I mean, do you think this is an honorable use of the Countach name, of bringing back the Countach
I think it's
name?
It's a nice little homage. It's nice to see it back. It's going to be a small run thing. It's only going to be for super rich people. It's not. It is what it is. But it's cool to see. I mean, I think about how many renderings have we seen of people trying to imagine a modern Countach?
You've seen it a lot.
It's a common thing. And it's almost like Lamborghini said, okay, hold my beer. I'll make my own.
Lamborghini, hold my beer.
Yeah. And what we got is really attractive. Like, I don't think there's anybody that's going to look at this thing and be upset. I do know a person who is upset at the idea of this car. And I'm not sure if you definitely know this person. He is our boss. Mr. Brandon Turkis, not a big fan of this. And I know that because I have had a conversation with him on Twitter about it. And so for anyone not watching on YouTube, I will read it for you. He said on August 9th, so yesterday as of this recording, when we first got these materials, I've never been more indifferent about the arrival of a new car than I am about the new Countach. I responded because it's the company rehashing old glories, which you could argue that. And his argument was because it's not a real car. Yes, it's real in the sense that Lamborghini will build and sell it, but the only place most people, including the ones arguing about it, will ever see it is parked on the fairway of a golf course, and I'm just kind of over that whole exercise.
Oh, see, he's wrong because it won't be on a golf course. It'll just be in somebody's collection. It would the regular Aventador will go to the golf course.
Well,
I mean, I understand where he's at.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not supposed to be something that's going to be driven by the average person every day. I mean, the original Countach really wasn't that.
No,
I mean, they sold. I have to look at my notes. They sold
1973, right?
They sold 1,983 original Countaches. So, I mean, it's not like that was a car that you saw every day. Part of its appeal was that it was so stinking exotic. Only a few people drove them. Mm-hmm. Usually the ones that did drive them were relatively flamboyant, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, that's probably going to be the case here. I don't think, Bruce, did you see anywhere in Lamborghini's announcement a price for the Countach? I didn't see anything anywhere either, but I've heard rumors, and I want to stress, this is just rumors that I've heard.
I assume it's got to be a 7-figure number
of like 1.3 or 1.5 mil, somewhere around there. Yeah, I mean it's going to be a car for just a few people, and it wouldn't surprise me if Lamborghini already has most or all of them spoken for. I mean, you're talking 112. It's not going to be that difficult, I think, to find hardcore Lamborghini enthusiasts that Lamborghini has in their books. We'll call up so-and-so. We're building this special edition Countach. It's the only time we've rehashed a name. This car is going to be epic. Do you want one? I mean, what Lamborghini enthusiast would say no to that?
Exactly.
None.
So right now on YouTube, we're looking at the very earliest example, the kind of before it got the wing, before it got the big fenders and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's still a gorgeous, futuristic looking car today. Honestly, they could have just brought that out, and I think people would still love it and buy every single one of them. I honestly do.
You mean like Ford did with the GT?
Yeah.
Just kind of go back in time a little bit.
And one thing I thought was interesting, so let me pull this away, and then I will pull up a picture. So this is the original concept, or one of the early concepts for the Countach, where you can see it doesn't kind of have the big kind of, I don't know what you'd call them, the inlets in the rear fenders. They kind of have gills instead. Apparently that was a cooling issue. They just couldn't get enough engine, or couldn't get enough air to that V12 engine.
I can't imagine them having cooling issues.
Yeah.
Even on the later designs that had big scoops, they still had cooling issues. They didn't really solve the cooling issues till the 25th anniversary model.
Right.
But I
think what's interesting is if you look at what the new one looks like, it's a blend of both, where let me find a good shot.
Yeah. The overall design for the new Countach was modeled after the earlier, the LP400 through the 70s. But I mean, they also threw in just some of the scoops, some of the things that you saw on the later models. More has, I mean, not necessarily afterthoughts, but more as homage to all of the versions of the Countach that came along.
So there you can kind of see on the back, they incorporated those gills and then also the inlet. So they kind of did a little bit of both. They took the concept that didn't quite work but looked really good, and then what was functional, and they kind of did a little bit of both of that for this one. So good on.
And I tell you what, the gaping side intakes, I think it looks pretty cool on here. I'm going to keep saying it. Since our teaser post came out, because Lamborghini sort of surprised us here at the beginning of the week with a teaser. I've seen a lot of people saying this car needs to be crazy, it needs to be wild. And I think when people see this, their first reaction is going to be, well, it's not crazy, it's not wild.
You think?
Yeah, well, I mean, look at it. It actually looks really clean. It looks really symmetrical. Think about an Aventador SVJ with all of its wings and all of its scoops and all of its things that are happening all over the place. It's such a busy design. And modern supercars and hypercars, excuse me, that's sort of the direction they've gone. We've become a bit jaded, I think, to what is a wild-looking car. And once upon a time, it didn't get any wilder than the Countach. But, folks, the Countach was designed 50 years ago. I mean, let that sink in. We're used to talking about the Countach as an icon of the 80s. This car debuted at Geneva as a prototype in 1971. That was
the concept is from 1971. That's what's shocking. Even if you look at what Ferrari or Porsche or any of the other European exotics were doing in 1971, it looked nothing like that.
Nothing like that. And it went into production in 1974. And it was fairly close to that original prototype. So
the early ones were,
So, I mean, this is not a new car or a modern car by any standard. So people are going to look at the new Countach based off the Aventador, and I think they're going to say, oh, well, it's just not wild enough. But you have to judge it in context, I guess is what I'm saying.
I think another thing worth pointing out is just how long the Countach lasted. Is that it was introduced in 74. It wasn't retired until 1990.
Right.
Like that's 16 years of think about any other car on the road. There are very few 16-year-old designs that are still on the road today. There are a handful. Nissan 370Z. I think I'm looking at you.
The Challenger is getting pretty. Actually, the Challenger is getting pretty close.
Too. But they did obviously tweak it on YouTube. We're looking at this now. This is one of the later ones, the big wing and the fender flares and the bigger ducts and the different front end. But you take all that off and you just end up with the original car again. Like they just tack stuff on as they kind of needed, but the original ethos is still under all of that.
Right. And that's why I think when again, this news is breaking right now as you're listening to the podcast, if you're listening to it when we air it, I think the initial reaction is going to be disappointment from a lot of people. I'm sorry to say.
I disagree with you.
I think it's going to be disappointment.
But I disagree
because they're going to, well, it doesn't have the big wing. And I know a lot of Lamborghini enthusiasts and owners, Countach owners, took that wing off because it actually slowed the car down quite a bit. Not that anybody was doing 180 on the highway. I mean, they probably were, but when you see this new Countach without the big wing, without the real prominent scoops that were sort of back there on its shoulders, I think they're going to say, oh, it looks watered down, and they're going to be judging it in context of a modern hypercar. And yes, this is a modern hypercar, but it's a modern hypercar based on an iconic classic. And I think when you put it in that context, you shouldn't be comparing this to a McLaren Senna or anything else. You should be thinking about how it compares to the original Countach. And I think in that respect, it's wild. It pushes all of the right buttons. It has all of the right features. It pays homage in the right areas. I'm absolutely in love with this thing. I would love to drive one
Mm-hmm.
I would love to get behind the wheel. I would love to just be in the presence of one. I'm very jealous of our colleagues that are out in Monterey right now, as you're listening to this, walking around the car. And again, if you go to motor1.com, we have features on the new Countach. We are going to have our own video that may or may not be up right now. If it's not up yet, it will be up
later in the day.
It'll be up very shortly because, I mean, again, this car is debuting August 13th during Monterey Car Week out at the Quail in California. We have teams out there that are going to video it inside, outside, the whole shot. Oh, yeah, it's been quite a week. I mean, we just learned about the Countach being revived just a few days prior to our recording this.
Yeah.
And Bruce and I we're really getting our first taste of it just here today. So
yeah, we saw the images late last week, and then as
we saw
of this recording,
a few images. Yep, last week.
Just got the press release today.
So I mean, we're kind of learning all of this along with everybody out there that's listening. So, rambling about cars, we love having you along on the journey, Bruce. We haven't talked about price. We did mention price. We did mention we don't know for sure. Lamborghini does tell us that deliveries will start the first quarter of 2022. Only 112. Again, I wouldn't be surprised if every single one of those already has a buyer.
Certainly.
Do you think they'll take this around the Nürburgring?
I don't think that's the point of this, if I'm honest.
It's not the point, but I mean,
will someone or, Lamborghini factory? Maybe, but that's not. So as we were talking about this, I was just thinking this is a bit more of, a styling exercise than it is a functional exercise.
This is styling over substance. Absolutely.
Yeah. We've seen from the STO models and stuff like that, Lamborghini can make a car that is just stupid fast around the Nürburgring. They have no problem with that, but that's not what this does. This is catering to a different clientele. You're not going to set whatever track record is around this on a circuit, but you're going to look damn cool going down the road.
Oh, you're going to look so cool.
It's still going to be stupid fast. It's still going to have most of the performance. It's just not going to have that extra 1 or 2% to, go down a track super, super well. But for most people, and I think for most buyers, most rich folks, I don't know, would have the skill to take an STO around the ring in the lap record times that Lamborghini can. Mm-hmm. So, I don't know that they're going to be missing much, but they're going to be getting something that arguably looks cooler. It kind of pays homage to the past while still looking modern. It's just damn cool. That's what it comes down to.
There's one difference here for me, though. When you look at all of the other very limited run Lamborghinis, the Cyan. What are some of the Veneto? Just some of the others over the years. None of them have been named Countach.
Right.
We can't overstress this. Lamborghini has never reused a name.
Yeah.
Before. This is the first time. And I'm trying to wrap my head around that. They're sending, it's aside from just, hey, we want to make something cool. They're sending a message. The message, I'm not even entirely sure what their message is. Maybe it's, hey, the future is rolling in this direction with hybrid power, but Lamborghini is still going to be here and still going to be amazing, and we're still going to drop your jaw. Or maybe they're saying we're coming to the end of the V12 era, so we're gonna give this one more. We're gonna give this another go here. I know we've heard that Lamborghini, their next generation hypercar, will have a V12. We don't know if that's
hybrid assistance, certainly.
Yeah, we don't know if that'll be like a plug-in hybrid. We don't know how that's going to work. So much going on here that we're a little unsure of with the messaging. But yeah, the takeaway is the Countach is back, and you absolutely need to email us, podcast@motor1.com. We want to know what everybody's opinion is on the Countach coming back, whether you think it is too mild, whether you think they didn't go far enough, whether you think it should have the wing. How long before somebody puts a wing on the back of one of these? Or better yet, how long before we see a rendering with the big wing on the back?
Oh, immediately.
I bet we see a rendering.
Everybody Sketch Monkey is doing that right now.
I bet we see a rendering before the end of the day Friday.
Yeah.
I bet we see a rendering with that wing. I'd like to see it. I want to see what it looks like with the wings. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there you go. Lamborghini Countach. Whew.
But the more I think about this, so the more I look at images of this and I think, and honestly, I want our commenters to weigh in on this because I'm not even 1,000% sure how I feel. Would Lamborghini have been better off to make a continuation special of the Countach?
No.
But, no, and yeah, maybe you're right. I don't know. Like, Jaguar has kind of been the flag bearer of doing that. They've done D types, C types, XKEs, all that sort of stuff, where they've just remade them. I don't know. As I'm working it out in my head, it wouldn't have got them as much press because this is a vehicle that has modern levels of performance with a classic look. But yeah, I don't know. Part of me just still wonders, should they have built more Countaches and said, here you go. I don't know. I'm working this out in my head as we talk about it. So
yeah, I mean, I understand what you're saying. I mean, I think Jaguar or Aston Martin.
Oh, Aston Martin's the other one. Yeah.
I think there's a better case for doing continuation cars there, just because they're a little bit more mainstream, right? I mean, can we agree that an old E-Type
maybe on the same level?
Old E-Type is a little bit more mainstream than a Countach that saw 1,983 models over 16 years. Yeah. And I mean, you also have to look at, I think, Lamborghini's just, financial status. I mean, they're a small company. They're a niche company.
They're a niche company owned by Volkswagen Group, which is a massive company. So
yeah, but you would still have to look at this from basically, okay, we need to build a new car.
Sure.
I mean, we know how to build it. We've built it in the past, but we need to build a new car that, honestly, I mean, it's an icon and it looks amazing and it sounds amazing and it was ridiculously fast for its time. But I mean, how many stories have you heard about how atrocious it was to drive?
Oh yeah.
Right. So
especially like there's, I don't know what episode it is, but there's the Top Gear where Clarkson buys one and has to put the scissor door up and is hanging out and kind of barely touching the clutch in order to parallel park it. Yeah, they were.
And James May also did an episode with a Countach where
did he? Okay.
He basically learned the lesson of don't meet your heroes because sometimes your heroes will disappoint you. And I mean, I've been in a few Ferraris. I've managed to drive a 308. I'm not a glamorous road test journalist, so I'm not getting all of these press cars. But I've had some nice Ferrari experiences over the years. I've never had a Lamborghini experience, and that's a little sad. So Lamborghini, if you can help me out, I would appreciate that. I can bring you all kinds of great coverage.
Lambo. Send one to my way too.
So I don't know from personal experience just how good or bad the Countach might be to drive. I'm a short guy, so maybe it would be a little bit better for me. I can also imagine I probably wouldn't be able to back the thing up because I'm not going to open up the door and lean halfway out like Clarkson did. I'm Hammond sized, right? I'm not going to be able to do that. But I mean, as far as other people's experiences trying to fit into small cars, I generally don't have that problem. So I might get into a Countach and just be like, oh, hey, this thing is fine. Oh, the air conditioning hardly works. Oh, who cares? Put the window down a little bit. Just turn on the vent. You're not driving a Honda. Go out and enjoy this car for what it is. I mean, I have been in vehicles like that before where the enjoyment isn't just the comfort you're having behind the wheel. It's the experience you're having with the car. Mm-hmm. And they aren't always the same thing, if you follow what I'm saying.
I do.
A loud, uncomfortable race car is going to be absolutely thrilling to drive, but you don't necessarily want to drive it every day. So You have Countach, it might be uncomfortable. It might not take care of you as well as a Honda or a Toyota might, but you're not driving it every day. You're enjoying it for a completely different reason. That's what it would be about. Now, the new Countach, you probably could drive that every day. Nobody's going to, though.
No. I worry that of the 112, 110 of these are going to go into a climate-controlled bubble and never see the light of day. And
probably
2 people I want to meet who actually use them. But yeah,
probably. But hey, that is life in the supercar world.
If you got the money, if that's what you want to do with it, go for it. It's kind of a shame.
Well, we've been talking a lot about Countach. And we're kind of winging this one here today, folks, because we had some plans. And it was like, well, Countach is going to be coming out on Friday, and in fact, that's why our podcast was even delayed a little bit, so we could make sure this didn't go out before the Countach news, before Lamborghini would let us put out the Countach news. So we had quite a few comments last week on
quite a few actually
on our YouTube video, and we even had an interesting comment on the post at Motor One. Commenting on
email. And via
yes, and email. I just want to do a quick shout out to the comment on Motor One. I don't have it pulled up in front of me, but the commenter was saying, "Hey, podcast gold, the way me and our MC Master of Ceremonies Clint we were going back and forth on Mitsubishi Starion car movies. We'll have Clint back on again. Clint's a cool guy. We need to devote an entire episode to 80s and 90s pop culture and just quiz him on how much he doesn't know. He's going to hate that. Sorry, Clint. We don't mean to pick on you, but you're just not nearly nerdy enough like the rest of us.
Clint didn't know that Whitney Houston didn't write "I Will Always Love You," and he was very confused.
He was like,
by that
"What?"
Earlier this week.
Did you guys know that?
Late last week.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. So hey, Clint's a cool guy. What other comments do we have, Bruce?
Sure. So I want to read this one, and I'm going to read it, and then I'm going to respond to it. So our buddy Renzo said, "Hello, Mr. Bruce and Mr. Smith. I hope you're all having a great day, and I hope you can answer a question on the podcast. I'm looking for a car for my mom to lease in Europe, which needs to be small, handy, and under 200 FR, which I have to say, thank you to Brandon Turkis for figuring out that was Swiss francs per month, and it needs to have 5 seats and not be under 2 years old." And Renzo, I don't know enough about European cars to be able to answer that question for you, especially not about buying cars in Switzerland. We asked some people. We have coworkers who are in Europe. They weren't able to get back to us. I wish I could answer that question, but I'm a dumb American and I don't know how to buy cars in Switzerland.
But here's something that I want to make sure everybody hears. We'll get some answers for you because Motor One, I mean, we are a worldwide network.
Yes.
And yeah, Bruce and I mean, I'm in South Dakota. It's a completely different environment, even for me here in the middle of the United States versus Bruce back in Ohio, especially right now with the Sturgis motorcycle rally going on. I'm surrounded by 700,000 Harleys. So, asking me for a friendly car to lease in Europe, all I hear is 2-cylinder straight piped right now. But we do have connections all around the world. We're going
to look into it for you. I just can't answer this for you this week.
Can't do it this week, but we have connections. We are going to come back to this. We'll try to do it next week. Thank you very much for listening. And this goes to anybody, wherever you're at. Shoot us a message. If you got a question, we're going to try to answer it. And if we can't answer it, we'll stand on our heads and make fart noises with our armpits or something. We'll do something to make sure that you're entertained. I promise.
So, Smith, do you have the YouTube from last week pulled up, or do you just want me to pick a random one from there? Because we had 4 comments there last week.
I've got YouTube pulled up here.
Okay, pick one, go forth it.
Let's see here. Let's read this one here by Benny J. Allen from YouTube. Thank you for reading my email. I really enjoyed the discussion. It started, especially with Clint weighing in. Everybody loves talking to Clint. Clint's such a cool guy. My wife worked for GM Financial every time she's had to deal with the actual motor company side, it was like a circus. Y'all are completely correct to say GM doesn't know what GM is doing. Also, I'd love to see the 3000 GT come back. Well done. Also, I'd love to see the 3000 GT come back, though Mitsubishi is in quite a pickle, so I'm almost positive it will never happen. Unfortunately, I'm almost positive as well. If Mitsubishi brings back anything performance-related, it's going to be the Evo. And I would be okay with that. But I think 3000 GT, nope. An Eclipse that's not a crossover, nope. Even a Galant VR4, nope. So I think about all we can hope for. About all we can hope for is an Evo. But
maybe we're going to get that Outlander Evo, but I just worry that Mitsubishi's going to screw that up. So I actually responded. So what I should say is that Smith or I try to respond to every comment that we get. For the most part, like,
Bruce better than me. I gotta be honest.
We're busy folks.
I have a pretty busy schedule. I try to jump on here when I can,
and I don't get them all either. But we try to respond to everything. So I responded to Benny saying, at the moment and for the past decade or so, Mitsubishi has been a zombie brand. It's still moving, but it has no soul, and I don't expect that to change anytime soon, or possibly ever. And I stand by that statement. I think Mitsubishi is just going to die a very, very slow death.
I fear that's the case as well.
Which is sad because it has been a really good brand, especially if you look at it. We talked about this on an episode. Mitsubishi got here in the late-ish 70s, I want to say, once Chrysler started bringing them over. Then by the 80s, you and I have talked about this. You have the Starion, you have the Conquest, which was a rebadged Mitsubishi. They had good times. 3000 GT, Dodge Stealth, the Evo. Our coworker Brett, his brother drove a Mitsubishi Montero across a good section of South America. Like, they made good cars. It's just they're just not good right now.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, I think they still make good cars in the reliable sense, but I mean, I think we all pretty much agree that they're not terrifically inspiring. They were trying to do that with the Eclipse Cross, and I think that just kind of fell on deaf ears. So, at Mitsubishi, we're pulling for you. I'm afraid that Bruce is probably right. We're just going to watch him die a slow death.
And so another comment from YouTube, our buddy Vampire Bear, he said, I believe the Conquest TSI, so also on that Mitsubishi thing, had 170 horsepower, but I drove one with 220 wheel horsepower thanks to the addition of a chip, which basically that means they just jack the boost all the way up.
Turn up the boost. Hey,
Sadly, I couldn't afford it, but Mitsubishi is dead, DEAD, all in capitals. If we bring back a car from them, if I could bring back a car from it, it'd be the Evo 8. And yes, I always wanted a Subaru Impreza WRX STI wagon. Dude, I'm on board with that. So yeah. And then he comments that I drive like an old man because of how long it takes me to get around Ohio. And I agreed with him because I do drive like an old man.
Yes.
So, yeah. But yeah, Vampire Bear, good comment. And I agree. Mitsubishi's just in a weird place, but they did totally make cool stuff at some point. Like, you can't debate that.
Absolutely. And I mean, thanks for folks for commenting. We try to read as much as we can. Bruce, do you want to talk a little bit more about some Countach history? We already covered some of that. I mean, there's some more we could talk about. Or do you want to talk about like maybe some of the Countach's competitors?
I'll hit Countach history just a little bit, and maybe you can pull up some Countach competitor stuff for me while I'm doing that. But yeah, so we talked about Countach in our first segment, and we kind of wanted to talk about where it came from just a little bit more in our second segment. And like Smith said, the concept of it debuted in 1971. Like, think about the cars out there in 1971. In the US, you're talking about pretty much the height of the muscle car era, or just past the height. Like, maybe it was going down a little bit, but very much the muscle car era. You're talking about, a very good time in terms of European cars. The 911 is out there. Ferrari's doing impressive things. The British still had a very viable sports car industry. And then they show off the concept for the Countach, which looks like nothing like that. Marcello Gandini is the designer, and he came up with a lot of those super wedge-like Italian cars at the time. And it just kind of evolved from there. So we saw the concept in 71, first production year we see in 74. And those early ones, they have the periscope rear view mirror, because even at the time you couldn't see out the back. So the result was that you look through the mirror and it was angled. And if you look at those very early cars, there's like a slit cut in the upper roof, and that's where the mirror was. So you would look and you could see out the back, periscope, like a periscope. And so that was neat. And they eventually got rid of that. And that meant you couldn't see out the back, especially the later ones once they got the wing and stuff like that. But yeah, it's a very interesting vehicle. The earliest ones, I believe, was a 4-liter V12. It was like 3.8 something.
It was a smaller V12. I mean, and they gradually bumped it up over the years.
Later ones were closer to 5 liters. So yeah, the early ones were 3.9 liters. So 4 liters, might as well call it. And then eventually they got up to 4.8 and eventually 5.2.
Mm-hmm. And Bruce, I find it very interesting. The 25th anniversary Countach. I'm kind of jumping ahead there a little bit.
No.
The 25th anniversary Countach. I mean, that was designed to celebrate Lamborghini's anniversary, but it was also really designed to kind of throw a little bit of shade, I think, back to the Ferrari Testarossa. Just through the 80s, the Testarossa had those big side strakes, so the Countach got some of that treatment for its anniversary edition. But do you know who was the sort of the main person behind the additions and the changes on that 25th anniversary Countach?
I do. Horatio Pagani, who is might know as Pagani for the Zonda, the C12S, Pagani.
Yeah, and it's like, and it's like, where have we heard that name before? Yeah, I found that very interesting.
Yeah, he was the guy behind that, which is, that's interesting that's where that starts, that he kind of takes that ball and runs with it, because especially when you look at the early Pagani supercars, there is kind of a very slight style. They're smoother, they don't have that angular look, but there is a little bit of a styling inspiration, I would say, from those kind of later Countaches.
Now, through the 70s, Bruce, I mean, what do you think what do you think were some of the big competitors for the Countach? I don't think when it came out, honestly, I don't think it had any competition. There wasn't anything like it.
So in terms of performance, I don't know if there is one. In terms of looks, I think Maserati, because they also had Marcello Gandini doing their designs. So I'm thinking, I'm trying to pull up a picture of it now. The Maserati Brera. Okay. Or no, not the Brera.
That's a good one. While you're doing that, I'm going to share a picture of this. People will recognize it right away. Has a Pantera.
Yes.
I don't know. See, here's the thing. I don't know that the Pantera. It's hard to say it was a Lamborghini rival, because it seemed like it was going after a different crowd, but it had.
Well, it also predates it as well.
It had that wild wedge shaped kind of style. It had just a raucous V8, which I think didn't have quite the same appeal for folks who wanted the Italian V12, right? But it had that wedge shaped styling, and I mean, they built a ton of these things over. Well, I think it lasted just about as long as the Countach, if I remember correctly. I mean, these were still being produced well into the 80s.
Mm-hmm. I want to say the very, very early 90s.
Into the early 90s went that long?
Like 91, maybe? Hold on.
Yeah, I'd have to look that up. But I mean, if I'm thinking in the 70s, I'm thinking, okay, the Pantera, your Maserati thing might be a good point as well.
92 is the last year for the Pantera.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, that's interesting. I wouldn't have expected that. One car that I think was a direct response to the Countach, and I don't know this for sure. I haven't researched the Ferrari 512 that much, I'll be honest. But when I think of 70s, and I'm thinking of Countach, I'm also thinking of the Ferrari 512 Berlinetta Boxer. Of course, I mean that had the engine behind the driver. It was a 12-cylinder, and I don't think it was as flamboyant as the Countach.
But it became that way because that eventually evolved into the Testarossa.
Yes, it did.
Kind of the Countach's main, at least spiritual competitor. Like,
yes,
both of those cars were kind of, you think Miami Vice, that's what you think of.
Yes, and through the 70s, I mean, I always loved the 512. If I were to choose between the Countach or the 512 for the 70s, I think I'd probably choose the 512 over the Countach. Not to say that the Countach is undeserving. I just kind of like the 512 better. I always like the engine note that car made. I mean, that and the Countach, they both sounded amazing, right? They both sounded good. But just I always kind of dug the 512. So I'm grateful for Lamborghini encouraging Ferrari to go in that direction.
And so not Brera, I'm sorry, Bora.
The Bora, yep.
But the Maserati Bora, which also has that very wedge-shaped Italian design that was kind of became a thing in the late 70s. We're talking about the Countach, and then also the Berlinetta Boxster that you were just talking about. But here's those cars kind of picked up that rough design language.
But here's the thing, though. When you look at the Bora or the 512, they both still somehow have sort of that 70s feel about them. They have the wedge shape, but the Countach was also very edgy.
Yes.
And I think that's important to note because I think that's what gave that design such longevity. I would love to talk to somebody that has never seen or heard of a Lamborghini Countach. Give them a picture of a 1978, the LP, the 400S model when it got the bigger fender flares. Because I think that's a really pivotal point in the Countach history when it kind of made that change. The earlier ones do have a bit of a 70s vibe, but from 78 on up, I would love to ask somebody, okay, how old do you think this car is? I bet they would think it's 90s, 2000s, much, much newer than it really is.
Tell you what, do you actually want to do this? Because I'm pretty sure my wife has never seen these. I can run upstairs and get her. She will not appear on camera. She'll refuse to do that. I can put the microphone in front of her, though, and we do this. Do this. Let's do this test for next week. Okay.
Let's do this test for next week. So everybody, okay, sure. You have to tune in next week. We're gonna find out. We're gonna find out from somebody who's never seen the Countach before. Your wife has never seen a Countach?
I don't think she has.
How have you not introduced her to a Countach, Bruce? I'm a little disappointed.
I'm never gonna own one, so she doesn't care. Like, I've shown her other cars that I've thought about owning, but she doesn't know about 70s and 80s supercars.
Okay, we'll go with it. We'll go with it. She's never seen a Countach. This will be perfect. So tune in next week. We're not done yet today.
Right now, if you can just vamp for me for a second.
Let's do it next week. Let's build up the audience here. Okay. Let's build up the audience here. Cool. This will be a good topic. And that also gives you, listeners, time to respond as well. If you have people, do this test on your side. Find people that have never seen a Countach. Show them a picture of a Countach. Say, how old do you think this car is?
This will be the rambling about cars version of the ice bucket challenge. Show your significant
there
other
you go.
Countach.
Significant other, friend, relative, anybody that's never seen the Countach.
Show your grandma a Countach.
Show them that car and say, how old do you think this is? We'll do it next week. We'll revisit this next week on Rambling About Cars.
I'm good with that. No problem.
Bruce, I mean, we've talked about Lambo history. We've talked about some of the competitors here. Can I ask something a little different here as we wrap it up?
Of course.
Because this got me a little nostalgic. Because I mean, I grew up in the 80s.
Yep.
The people that didn't grow up in the 80s, they don't understand that, yes, this really was the poster car. It was everywhere. I had a poster in my room. It is the car. It really defined the supercar genre.
Did you really have car posters in your room?
I absolutely had car posters. I had Countach. I had Mustang posters at one point. I think I had a Corvette poster at one point. And now I was also into aviation, so this worked out really good. I had a poster of an FA-18 Hornet with one of the early Vectors, the W2.
Oh, that is early.
Yeah, the Vector W2 twin turbo next to an F-18 Hornet. I still adore that poster. I don't know what happened to it. I mean, I was a kid. It probably got tore up, right? But the Countach just sort of launched that section. And because of that, we had cars like the 512BB. We got the Ferrari Testarossa. And I think it was responsible for a litany of other high-performance cars that would become supercars that would eventually become hypercars. That being said, through the 1980s, we really saw this evolution take place.
Wait, hold on one second.
Oh, did you find the poster?
No. I didn't find that poster.
Okay.
But this poster, I did not own this, but it was in every store I ever went to. Do you remember the justification for higher education poster?
I do. Look at that. So there are
sadly no Lambos in this, but I saw this everywhere.
There are no Lambos. So on the left, oh man, I remember that too. Yeah, I saw that everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So you have a 328 on the left.
Yep. 928
with a Porsche 928, and that's going to be what, like probably
some
Mercedes,
sort of Mercedes,
a Mercedes 500 probably.
Yeah, Corvette, and then an E30.
A Corvette with a body kit.
Yeah,
because the wing and that rear fascia. Yeah, no, and then a BMW convertible
E30
at the
convertible.
end, an E30 convertible. Justification for higher education. That is such an 80s poster.
That was everywhere.
That could be another episode, just ridiculous 80s car posters. Oh, and did you notice, Bruce, when you were looking through the new Countach photo gallery, there's a picture in there of an original 1970s, early 70s Lamborghini media photo.
No.
We've talked from time to time on devoting an entire episode to weird 60s and 70s automaker press photos.
I'm totally on board with that, by the way. We just need to figure out the time to do it.
I'm on board with that too. We have to spend a little bit of time gathering these photos up, because it's not as easy as you might think to find 50 and 60-year-old press photos. But when they show up, like the picture of the Range Rover with people just standing around in plaid with guns with an airport.
Dude, that's a Matra ad.
Oh, that was you're gonna pull it up now.
Well, I will, because now I'm looking for this Lambo thing you're talking about. But
while you're doing that, let me pose the question that I was going to ask originally. Pick one or two supercars from the 80s. You can have, we'll say you can have two. Which ones are you going to choose? And is it going to be a Countach?
No. 959 is the first one that comes to mind, and then F40 immediately after that.
Okay.
Like, it's not even. I don't even have to think about it.
Okay. Well, now I need a little bit more explanation behind that. What makes those such a step above the others that you don't even need to think about it? Because my choices are completely different.
Sure. So 959, I'm a Porsche guy. For reasons that are entirely nostalgia based and for family based, I want a Porsche in my life, and so 959 to me is the immediate one that comes to mind. And then right after that, the one that I think is most important is the F40. It's hard for me to think of a late 80s or just 80s in general supercar and not consider the F40. So yeah, that's why.
Okay, fair enough. Well, because I was thinking a lot about this too. And I think I would have the Countach.
Okay.
I think I would. I don't want the 25th anniversary though. I would just take the LP 5000 S Quattro.
Valvove.
Quattro Valvove. Yes, thank you. I think the 25th anniversary is just a little bit overstyled. I don't need it to try to mimic the Testarossa.
You will never convince me that's not the greatest press image ever.
There's the press image. Yeah, just standing around with a bunch of guns. Hey, we're going out for
shotguns.
We're going out for tea. Yeah, we have to do an episode.
The guy in the middle kind of looks like tall Prince. If Prince had like an extra 18 inches on him, that's Prince.
It could well be. We need to devote in the near future. We need to devote at least half an episode to just going over some of these old press photos, trying to figure out what the hell they are trying to convey here. Because we have seen some strange ones over there. It's just like, just like cars sitting in a generic field with a runway.
With a Piper Cub behind him.
Yeah. What was the one? It's like the Piper Cub wasn't even on the runway. It was just like sitting in the grass behind the car.
Right. It was something from the 60s. I don't remember what it was. But anyway,
So anyways, going back, I would have to have the LP 5000, the Lamborghini Countach. I think that's just such an iconic car.
You're not going to fight with me. Yeah.
And I don't care if it's going to be miserable to drive because I'm not going to drive it all the time. The time that I do spend in it, I'm going to relish the experience for what it is. It's not going to be something comfortable. It's not going to be something that coddles me. It'll be something that maybe you have to grab by the scruff of its neck and just yank around, and I'm fine with that. The look, I think the Countach would have to be it for me. The other one,
though. Okay, yeah. What's
the other one? I've always loved the Ferrari 288 GTO.
Okay, yeah.
Always. I would take that over the F40. The F40 exists because of the 288 GTO.
Yep.
There was the Evolution version of the 288 GTO that basically became the F40. The 288 GTO, it was originally designed to go up against the 959 in Group B. Mm-hmm. And then of course Group B fell apart. So that twin turbo V8, that 308, 328 kind of style. The F40 is cool. I would never debate that it's not an insanely impressive vehicle, but it just never did it for me. It was just a stripped down kind of bare bones, just get to the point car. If I want to strip down, bare bones, get to the point car, honestly, I'm just going to buy a race car. Okay. Sorry, Ferrari people. I know there's going to be F40 people. This will be like another super thing all over. Oh, he's just dumping on the F40 for the hits, for the
clicks,
for the clicks. No, I'm not dumping on the F40. I think it's perfectly fine. I was never interested in the bare bones aspects. And I was never fascinated by it.
That's fair.
The 288 GTO, I feel like it has more substance. It has more style. It's almost as fast. Mm-hmm. It's not going to handle quite as well, but it's almost as fast with that twin turbo V8. So 288 GTO, Lamborghini Countach. I would be a pretty happy guy with both of those cars in my garage.
No fight for me.
So what does everybody out there choose for their 80s supercars? It's okay if you want to choose the Lamborghini Countach. Nobody would hate you on that. It's okay if you want to choose the F40. Nobody would hate you on that. I might judge you a little bit if you just choose a 911 Carrera. Because let's go with something really exotic here. At least get a turbo, right? So, podcast@motor1.com. Email us there. Hit us up with comments on the post that go up every Friday at motor1.com. You can also follow me on Twitter, CH Writing. You can follow Bruce on Twitter, Chris Bruce 1985. Bruce, I know we're kind of getting to the end, and I know you're still studiously looking something up. Are you still trying to find that F-18 Vector poster?
No. Okay. So in 2014, one time I've been to Monterey Car Week, there was a lineup of kind of all of the special Ferraris. Sadly, I didn't get a 288. I don't think that's a 288 GTO.
Yeah, it is.
Is it on the left?
Yep.
Okay.
That is the 288 GTO. You can tell immediately by that front clip.
Okay.
With
then
the
racing version, and then you can see just a little bit of the F40.
F40. Yep. Yeah, the 288 GTO, it looked a lot like the 308.
That's what I was.
It looked a lot like the 308, but the front was a little flatter. You had the bigger fascia there with the driving lamps down low. Obviously, it had wider fenders, much wider tires on it. I think that's just such a stunning looking car.
It's a very understated car. Like the F40 is not understated at all, even by modern standards. But you look at that, and you could think it was a 308 or 328. And
you've got the F40 has the big wing on the back. It had the driving lights and the marker lights up front in the housings that kind of sloped a little bit. So the car always looks sad to me. And I don't know, maybe that's why it just didn't appeal to me as much as it's done to others. It's just, a Ferrari should never look sad. You're a Ferrari. You'd have nothing to be sad about unless you're like a Mondial T. That might be a little sad. But
yeah, that's what I was trying to hunt down, because I knew I had a photo of it and I was just trying to find it.
Yep, 288 GTO. Such good stuff.
Yeah.
Email us podcast@Motor1. Give us all of your information. Share your opinions here. Bruce, is there anything we didn't cover here?
I think
it's been a hell of an episode.
Yeah, we hit all the high points. This was very much a rambling episode of Rambling About Cars, where we're just kind of talking about Italian supercars of the 1980s and a little bit of Italian supercars of today, just a little bit. But that's okay. Sometimes we want to ramble, and that's what this episode was. But as always, good afternoon, good evening, or good night, whenever you happen to be listening to us. We appreciate you. Sorry, we love your comments. We love your likes, your subscribes. We just like the fact that you're there and you're listening to us, and we kind of do this show for you guys, because if not, trust me, looking at our chat from every day, we would just be doing this without you. So
we would be doing this, probably Bruce and I in chat, involving some of the other Motor1.com editors and writers.
Exactly.
And if we can do it with everybody out there, hey, let's bring it on. The more people, the better.
So I hope everyone enjoyed learning about all this Countach stuff. And again, we have videos up, not only from us, but I think our Italian colleagues. I think we have a couple of videos up. We definitely have a post up. We definitely have several follow-ups. So it's the week of Countach. It's the week of the Countach's return, and I hope everyone enjoys that.
All hail Countach.
Yep. So bye-bye.
See ya.